My name is Stephen Zuhair Antone. I was born in Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, and I grew up most of my life in Farmington Hills. Growing up as a Chaldean American was interesting. I never felt very different in my school, but I knew that there were differences among me and my friends. I know that I had a lot of cousins. I had a lot of friends that were related to me, and we had a lot of family time together. Most of my first sleepovers and parties and events that I attended were communions and graduations, and they were mostly family events. So that was different from what a lot of my friends were doing. So my mom was born in Telkeppe in 1941. She came to the U.S. in 1950 when she was 9. She came with the rest of with her family. My dad was born in Baghdad in 1936 and came to the United States in 1960. So he was 24 years old. And they met here. They met in Detroit. They met at a family function. And then my dad looked at my mom and said to a friend, "I'm going to marry a woman like that one day." But he always told us there was some stigma about being a student and being like on a student visa. He didn't want to feel like he was marrying somebody just to stay in the country. So he was going to wait until he did it the right way. And several years later, they sort of met again and had a short courtship and got married in 1966. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, so I have 3 older brothers. We're 8 years apart from top to bottom, and we've lived in the Detroit area our whole lives. I didn't hear a lot of stories about the old country that much. Some of the struggles they had when they came to this country were much of it around being around the language difference, the culture difference. I didn't hear a lot of stories, say, of persecution, but again, just there was a difference of how they were treated. I know a lot of the ways that my dad got into business was because he would work for somebody, but it would be hard to be an employee. And so I think that's why a lot of Chaldeans started their own business, so they could just sort of be in control of their lives. And then that turned into my dad owning a grocery store and owning another one, and then owning another one. And that's the one that I grew up in. The last store in East Point was called Giant Foods. And I worked there and lived there, and not lived there, but sort of lived there because we were there often. And so the stories of the early days were kind of being around family, having someone that could look out for them. My dad often tells stories of whenever he needed money for something. To his brother, my uncle, was going to go to get married in Baghdad, and so he needed to borrow money. He would borrow money from Mike George and pay him back off in the milk bills. As he was buying milk from the store, he would add something to every milk bill until he paid him back. Those stories were great. There was always that story of cooperation and just a real community, that I think is not really common in a lot of the country today. Yeah, my parents visited Iraq a couple of times that I have heard of. I didn't go, but I know I've seen some film and some photos of they went when my oldest 2 brothers were young, maybe 1 and 3 years old each. They went back to Baghdad, and I don't remember if they went to Telkeppe or not. And then I do remember once my dad going back to Baghdad by himself, probably when I was born, but I was young. And then when the first Gulf War happened in 1991, I was in high school. And so really, if there was a time when we could have traveled, that closed travel for that period of time, and really ever since. So my one brother and I have never been back to the Middle East. Hearing about the wars in the Middle East at the various times in the 90s and the 2000s and later, there was a mixed feeling. While I was born here and I've always considered myself an American, there was that cultural pull that always had that I had that tie to. And it was strange because I support my country and the people in it. There was difficulty, mostly difficulty, in just watching my parents watch it, because they had difficulty in seeing. My dad would say, there's this country was so beautiful, these buildings were so beautiful, and it's just it's been knocked down, or there's they're occupied now, and nobody knew at the time how it was going to end up, whether it was going to be good for the country or bad for the country, or in our case specifically, is it good for the Chaldeans or bad for the Chaldeans that this is happening? And so it was challenging to see that history go away. I remember there were stories when museums would be looted, and just seeing the damage that was done, and that's hard to watch from a historical perspective when you know that some of those things will never be recovered, and or if they were damaged beyond repair, it takes away from places like here in the cultural center that gosh, we could have used those here. We could have done something with those. We could have shown them off here. They didn't need to be stolen. They didn't need to be damaged. So that was disappointing, I'd say. My mom is Rosemary Antone. She was one of the founders of the Chaldean Cultural Center. And she got involved much in the way she got involved with a lot of other things in her life is she saw a need. And whenever she saw a need, I think she felt compelled to meet it. If it was a person who was struggling, if it was a group who was struggling, or in this case, there was a need to tell our story, to tell the Chaldean story. And we did things as a family. We always knew, everybody knew what everybody was doing. It was just kind of, we would have dinners together on Sundays. When we were living at the house, obviously we were there. And when the cultural center came up, we definitely remember being in conversations of my mom going to New York to talk to curators of the museum and trying to find different artifacts that we can use here in the museum, and the discussions about what should be here, how should it be portrayed, how can we include the most amount of people and stories and ideas that were there. So my mom was a sort of a force. She when she put her mind to something, she went full in.
We want our pioneers to be proud of what they did and where they brought us, where they were and where we are now. And we want future generations, our American neighbors and friends, to know who the Chaldeans are.
I don't think I really understood what she was building when she first started the project for the Chaldean Cultural Center. I didn't know that it was the only Chaldean museum in the country or in the world at the time. I just knew that it was important to her, and when things were important to my mom, she put all of her heart and soul into it. And she was the type of person, her passion was infectious. And so as she was going on to something, she would get people to come on to the project with her, and we would come alongside her, and her friends would come alongside her, and her acquaintances would come alongside her. And even if there were people that didn't know her well, you just couldn't help but just be caught up in the wave of her passion. So my dad had more of a quiet role in the process of the cultural center. My mom's had the really big passion and push for it. My dad was supportive of whatever my mom did because he could see how important it was to her. And I think my dad could recognize how important the cultural center was. I don't think he had the vision for it like my mom did and like the other founders did. So he just wanted to be supportive in any way that he could. And it wasn't an option to question her or to change her mind about things. It was just a matter of, this is what she's doing. Let's go forward. Let's make this the best that it can possibly be. I'm a pediatrician. I work in Rochester Hills. I live in Bloomfield Hills. And my family taught us the importance of education. That was always the number one thing in our family, was to get an education and to make something of ourselves and the family. I learned a lot from my parents about that, about one, the importance of the education, but also the importance of family and faith in our lives. And that continues to trickle down to where we are now, where our family has very similar values. My family, my children and my wife, where education is important, family is important, our faith is important. And those are all Chaldean values, they're family values. And we just feel like that's the best way to really to glorify God and to thank our parents, is having them see that we followed in their footsteps in a way, and have a successful and happy life. So my mom, Rosemary, passed away in 2009. We're very grateful that she got to see this the museum come to fruition, because this really was so important to her. My dad passed away in 2023, and so my brothers and I discussed who was going to be the one to speak about the museum and our parents, and I said I want to tell their story and have them be part of it, because this was so important to my mom, being the only museum for Chaldeans in the world. We thought that it was important to at least tell our family story, and how my mom was instrumental in the founding of the museum, and I'm proud to be sitting here representing her. I think the center and museum are important because I think our story needs to be told. I think I was always told that we have the largest population of Arab Americans outside the Middle East, and including Chaldeans. I think there's so many people around here that know something about what Chaldeans are, but maybe don't know exactly what Chaldeans are. Maybe they don't know. They know some Chaldeans, but they might not know the history. And so I think going back to the beginning, that the fact that Chaldeans were around in biblical times, the fact that they've been, they were early converts to Christianity, the fact that they've persisted to this day and have really thrived in a new country where this is nobody's first home. The fact that they came here and made a place for themselves, for their families, and really for a whole community. I think it's really important to tell that story, and I'm glad to see that future generations will be able to hear the story, see the story, really live and be immersed in the story. It's exciting. When I first entered the museum, I was really taken aback by how well done, how well put together it is. From the timeline of going from ancient times and going into sort of more historical, traditional roles, to the Ishtar Gate and the religion aspect of it, and then the recent older history, and then the more the maybe the 1950s and 60s, and seeing a lot of the grocery store references, and seeing the modern day, the old passports, names that I recognized, passports that I recognized. It really did sort of bring me back to a lot of stories that I heard that my parents tell, of the people and the things. It all kind of came rushing back, and I was a little emotional when I first experienced it. The message I would give to the new generation is I think that it's important to know your history, and I think that it's important to forge your own path also, which is difficult to do both. But I think it's important. It's hard to know where you're going unless you know where you came from, and so I think that this center will help them to do that. And I think just in anything that you do, what we do is affected by who we are and where we came from, and so that is important to know, is know who you are, know where you came from, and know how to proceed going forward. Not to say you have to do it the same way or the same things, but to find a way that at least is consistent with your values.